Coogs House. All right, Davy Crockett is probably the most famous Tennessee volunteer to head to the Lone Star State and try to save the day, but I think Houston might have just found another one.
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Coogs your first listen of the day. If you enjoyed the conversation but don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below if you like your cookies chewy or crunchy. Obviously, everyone wants the crunchy outside and the gooey middle, but if you're only going to pick one or the other, which way would you prefer it? Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. We got more on that fun later. We got a bunch of things to get into, including some really heartwarming basketball news I want to make sure we touch on before the week is over. I want to talk about the continued AD search at the University of Houston. Sounds like we may get some things resolved early next week. So where do things stand? But the latest news in what's going on with the athletic director search in Houston is that there's a Tennessee volunteer that may just be the perfect candidate. Now, on Thursday, it broke that Ryan Alpert of the University of Tennessee is a very serious candidate for the University of Houston and is also making it down to this final stage of interviews after having not had his name publicly mentioned to this point. Ryan Alpert is the Deputy Athletics Director, Chief Operating Officer at Tennessee, the Volunteers, hence the Davy Crockett Open. There may not be a whole other connections there, except I will point out that one of the biggest recruits of all time that's committed to Houston class 2026, Keyshawn Henderson, he's like famous for wearing the raccoon skin cap. So, something's there, right? It's on the air, symbols and all of that. Ryan's impressive resume at Tennessee makes him a perfect candidate for what Houston needs. And I have to say that when he wasn't on the list early on, I wouldn't have known to look at this kind of stuff. But the specific things he's done at Tennessee would translate very well to the things that would help out the University of Houston. At Tennessee, he oversees the capital projects. They've in the just over 2 years he's been there. I guess close to 3 at this point. He did over the capital projects have totaled over $500 million. It includes like creating a whole entertainment district that adds to the football game day experience. In a more long-term situation, or look at what he's done there. He's been heavily involved in scheduling big, aka revenue-generating non-conference football games for the Volunteers in 2022 and 2023. So 2 full years, each 2 full years that he's been there after having his work done. They've set records in revenue as an athletic department. The 2 years combined to be over $350 million. This guy is big time into fundraising in modern sports. And I know people talk about, well, he's selling Tennessee and this, that, and the other thing. But even just relative to what Tennessee had been doing, they're setting records in, frankly, a climate that's kind of hard to set records in because there's so many different ways that donors can be pushing their money to. And he's putting it directly back into things that Houston needs improvement in. The game day experience is going to need to be better in a Big 12 environment, right? You're going to need to have those revenues to build up facilities to compete with the rest of the Big 12. We also know that after the House settlement, you're looking at potentially paying athletes up to a $20 million a year kind of salary capped kind of thing. You want to make sure you have some money coming in for that as well. Big time money guy at a big time program that bring a great amount of experience to do that at Houston. He also, for what it's worth, has not just been at Tennessee. He had 2 different stints at Missouri. His second one, he was the deputy AD for external operations there, involved in creating new revenue streams, ticketing, and marketing. Again, areas that Houston needs help. And he did at another SEC school in Missouri. In between those Missouri stints, he was at FAU, where he oversaw directly football and men's basketball. We're looking at like people that climb the ladders in this athletic administration business. being involved in the revenue sports like football and men's basketball is a key sign, right? That means FAU saw him as a guy that was going to be a quick climber. They hand him their revenue creating sports to be in charge of. If you go far enough back, I should point out that he was also at Memphis and involved in fundraising for them. And at the time, set a record of the capital campaign of $32 million. That was the most they'd had to that point for an athletic campaign. All of this is to say, the dude understands raising money for athletics. He understands it in the present tense. He understood it in the past tense. He gets the way the game is played. He understands what big-time athletic programs look like. He's been at multiple SEC institutions, and we've seen the kind of dollars and cents that those toss around, right? Honestly, I think the biggest thing that helps Houston out in this is that Houston has the city of Houston behind. If they want to offer to Ryan Alpert before offering it to anyone else, make him their top candidate, Houston has the city of Houston behind them in a way that they can pull in, unlike, Tennessee or Missouri. The city aspect of it's not quite as big. The big difference, I think, is that in Tennessee, everyone in the state is, generally speaking, a Tennessee person. Everyone in Missouri is, generally speaking, a Missouri person. I know there's offshoots here and there, but generally speaking, right, they're the only show in town. And it's kind of the opposite in Houston, right? We all know that Houston competes with a lot of people for the real estate in their backyard. But frankly, he's competed or run an athletic department that has competed with some of those same schools, right? And so I want to stress that this guy understands where the game is heading, where it's been, and what it looks like at the highest levels, and that this, constant push towards building a revenue generating, upping the dollars and cents, more money, all of that seems to be a constant focus from the school, right? We heard it back when Pez got fired, right? The big deal was that the donor money wasn't coming in fast enough, and that was kind of falling into his lap. Like, how can we only be at this spot and this spot and that spot in terms of several different money? So it wasn't the only thing that had to do with Pez, apparently, right? But that was a big part of it, right? Every candidate we hear has something to do with money or revenue generating or whatever at the school that they are at. And we know they had added a whole separate position that we believe, we haven't seen any confirmation from the school yet, but it's been linked to other outlets online, that Allie Smith is going to be running that spot as well. We know that they're creating new jobs just to help out in this area, right? Having someone like Ryan Alpert that's made big time campaigns successful is going to be important, because Houston's going to need to launch big time campaigns in the near future to be the top tier competitive program it can be. We've seen Houston get by and win, frankly, not that distant past, with less than acceptable revenues, if we're being completely honest, right? And we know there's a possibility that you can win here without it. We're seeing some programs win, like men's basketball, with a lot less than the teams that they're beating in terms of finances, right? There's ways to make up for that. When you have those things and add in this other big factor that is the money, things can really take off and explode. Ryan Alpert, as far as his allegiances go, he's a South Carolina alum. So again, more SEC stuff. But I don't think that I'm worried about him jumping ship to go. I mean, I guess he spent 2 different stints at Missouri, but I don't think I'd be worried about him jumping ship to go anywhere if he got to Houston, really had a chance to. First of all, it was fairly compensated, and then had a chance to build it up. While the SEC dollars and cents are more, at this point, I would think that he could turn this into the kind of place that has a more comparable, competitive kind of salary for that position. And he'd have warranted getting paid that, because he would have grown it to that at that point. Now, I want to talk some about him and the other candidates. And I think that it's interesting what they have, or what they do, or what their resumes have that are similar in a moment. But first, the whole point of building this up is to build a winning set of programs. I love winning. You love winning. We both love sports. We never want them to stop. And in the summertime, it can feel like things slow down, especially this like post-Olympics lull. It's like, what am I watching all day? Answers, you're watching baseball, WNBA games, preseason football games, whatever. And whenever you're watching this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with boosts or bonus daily to help get in on the action. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. I told y'all early on to get on the Astros. WNBA has a bunch of fun lines as well. Head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of the last bit of your summer. FanDuel, it's just official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, so in comparing Alpert with other candidates, I think what's interesting is he actually has a resume that kind of directly compares to the other candidates that were kind of leading the pack to this point, right? Taking out Jeremiah Dickey, who is the AD at Boise, and it sounds like we haven't heard his name a whole lot as far as the search goes since the very beginning. So much that makes you wonder who was really leaked by way back, right? But in comparison to like Eddie Nunez, who's the New Mexico athletic director, we heard was a finalist the other day and kind of had his name keep coming up a lot and looked like he had a very strong case to get the Houston job, right? Both of them at their respective institutions, Ryan Alpert at Tennessee, Eddie Nunez at New Mexico, both are involved in revenue generation. They both have this idea of like maximizing the money coming in, building up the game day experience to do that, right? And for what it's worth, both did well, relatively speaking, at their respective institutions. Now, obviously, Tennessee is going to make more money than New Mexico, but both had record-setting years in a post-pandemic, weird NIL kind of world, right? That's important. They both did that relative to what their schools had beforehand. And so this idea that they're coming to Houston means that they're going to, relative to what Houston's had, continue to break records and build it up, etc. Right? The biggest difference I see is that, or I guess there's two. Okay. Eddie Nunez has a lot of, in his time in New Mexico, had a lot of student athlete support. That's kind of the forefront of some of the stuff he was doing there. He's also there a lot longer, right, than Ryan Alpert's been at Tennessee. So there may be some connection there, right? Ryan's been very money, dollars and cents focused. That's been a lot of the things tagged to his resume as far as the things you can look up online, right? It's very business oriented, which is setting up for the business of college sports, which is the future of college sports at this point, right? The other thing is that Eddie Nunez has been on a number of different boards across the country. He's kind of been asked to represent Group of Five schools and Group of Five school thought at a bunch of different kinds of NCAA, full NCAA kind of events. Alpert has kind of bounced around. He's been here for a couple years, there for a couple years, etc., and thus hasn't had a single place to call home long enough to kind of earn the reputation I think that would get him into those kinds of things, right? You see, Ed Nunez has been at New Mexico since 2017, the AD in New Mexico since 2017, right? And so he's kind of a well-known, respected face for that school and that level of competition. Alpert's bounce around, not quite the same thing, right? Again, very comparable resumes between the two. Fletcher's a big guy from Lone Star Sports and Entertainment, kind of coming out of professional sports in a weird way, or at least the entertainment area aspect of sports in a weird way to come and potentially have this job. Houstonian through and through, right? Understands the business of sports in Houston, very involved in the business of sports in Houston. His resume is fairly comparable in the sense that it's always been about the business, right? The big difference is that Fletcher's understanding of business comes from a pro sports feeling background, where Ryan Alpert's business understanding, or the understanding of the business of sports, comes from college background, big time college athletic departments, right? And they're both obviously about maximizing dollars in a very similar way. They just have had different experiences with how and where you do that. I also continue to bring Keli Zinn. I think she'd be a great candidate for this job. She's the deputy AD at LSU, right? She spent a long time at West Virginia before then, and I think her resume reads is very similar to Ryan Alpert. One of the reasons I'm so high on Ryan at this point is that I was high on Keli, and their resumes are a lot alike. They both have like the second highest job in athletic administration at very high-end athletic departments in college football, in college sports, right? That is a wealth of experience to bring in and build up the programs at Houston, right? That's ideas and models and ways to do things, the correct way to do things coming into Houston would be a big deal. Both also in their times, their respective schools saw athletic success, right? I mean, you can tie that to administration much as you want to or don't want to, but they both saw different programs be successful in their time as administrator. And I'm not talking just football in that instance either, right? They both saw success across athletic departments and understand how vital that is to ultimately building up the business. People want to pay for winners, right? And so they see how those things, they've seen how those things get tied together. Both, for what it's worth, also worked at other big time institutions before the one they're currently at, right? We mentioned that Ryan Alpert worked at Missouri twice, and he spent some time at FAU and Memphis before that. We're interspersed with all that. Keli Zinn spent a long time at West Virginia, was even their interim AD for a moment at West Virginia, right? And kind of has that experience of seeing what the Big 12 looks like as a newcomer from somewhere else, right? And so both of them have multiple big time institutions to pull experiences from, right? They had this idea of what things look like and what success means at multiple stops, right? Really, really important factor in this. I think at this point, based on what I can read in resume finding and digging online, that Ryan Alpert would be the biggest home run candidate as far as pulling in someone that has a proven track record at a big time institution. He just checks a lot of boxes, right? I still am very high on Keli Zinn. I would probably put Nunez ahead of Fletcher myself because I'd want someone who understands college athletics, because college athletics is shifting dramatically. And I don't mean to make Fletcher the fourth dog in this race. What I will say is, of these four people, there is not one I would be disappointed with. And I think what's interesting is that while I've been disappointed with the process, Pesman's firing felt very rushed and last minute. There was kind of a leaked list of candidates immediately after that apparently had nothing to do with it because they're not around anymore, right? It's taken a long time. We had a football game later this month. Where are we doing, right? Those things have disappointed me about this process and frankly frustrated me in this process. But the names we've got at this point, assuming it's one of these four people, I'm really excited about. I could easily see any of the four being very successful in building up the Houston Athletic Department. Now, do I have ones I like more than others? Sure, you do too. Your neighbor does. Your dog does. Everyone has the ones they like more. But I think it's worth mentioning there's no one I don't like. And I know as far as your Houston Cougar content creators go, I'm probably the one that, remember last football season, that gets way too positive way too often. And, some people want someone that, beats down and gets negative and gets really critical. But I think there's something to be said about having finalists that are all good candidates. And while there's a difficult decision to be made, and I might make one that's different than you or ultimately Dr. Couture, I have to say that I feel like this is going to work out. The names, if it's one of these four names, and I guess there are people that aren't these four names that could work out too someday. I just don't know who else it would be. These four names will work out. That's a good thing. That's something to feel good about. And it feels like we're getting close. There were reports on Thursday. I think I saw Duarte and Baldwin both say it. And I just want to not get in the middle of that fight and just say that they both said it. But Duarte and Baldwin both said we could be looking at this hire being made, announced, at least being announced early next week. Obviously, as soon as I hear something, you'll hear something. It's a big deal, right? This is a big deal. It's a big moment for the university. You're in the Big 12. College athletics is changing. this could be monumental, right? And I think they've got good people lined up for this. Now, as much as I feel good about that, there is some feel-good news I have about basketball. I want to talk through the process and the arduousness and all of that got to that point. But first, we're talking about football games at the end of the month. We're talking about baseball games all summer. We're talking about all kinds of things you got to get out and do. Getting out and doing those things requires tickets. And the best place to get tickets for whatever you are going to is the Game Time app. I mean, whatever you're going to. Sporting events, concerts, comedy shows, the theater, whatever it is, Game Time has the tickets. They have last minute deals, flash deals, different zones get deals, all kinds of things at the Game Time app today. What I really like are two things here, right? All in pricing. I never feel tricked. I always know exactly what I have to pay when I'm going through this, and I have to worry about what's the fee going to be for this, the taxes for that. They show you all the prices up front as you're looking for the ticket. And if I wonder what the view is going to be like from my seat in that venue for that type of event, especially as important in a concert or something like that, they can show you exactly what it's going to look like from that section and row at the venue, at the type of event once you click on the tickets, right? So all kinds of great features. The lowest price guarantee means that Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find tickets in the same section and row for cheaper somewhere else. So what are you waiting for? Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege. LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, so I wanted to mention here at the last segment of the show, I didn't want to pass up, didn't want to go into the weekend without mentioning the good news for Terrance Arceneaux. You remember Terrance Arceneaux was one of the highest ranked basketball recruits to ever come to the University of Houston, came in with Jarris Walker and Emmanuel Sharp in the 2022-23 season, kind of played a 7th, 8th man role. He was the second guard off the bench as a freshman, sometimes third, depending on what the rotation needed, but clearly had some things he did that just felt loose and natural at that point, right? Arceneaux would then come into his sophomore season this past year, 23-24, and kind of have a slotted for a bigger role. He was looking like he might even be the 6th man, not quite a starter, but an important factor in the program. And his versatility defensively is what made him such a weapon in the Kelvin Sampson defense, right? 6'5", long arms, guards a lot of positions, guards 4s, guards 2s, guards 1s, guards a bunch of different spots, right? He is such a potentially strong defender, right? And I mean, I'd say that he has a lot of potential. That there were people, even with him as the 8th man in the rotation, projecting him as a second-round pick after his freshman year, late second-round pick, but admittedly a second-round pick, just because NBA teams want athletic, rangy bodies like that on their rosters, right? Not necessarily, he's not like a giant, he's not 6'10", but he's just got the frame, got the athleticism, got the coordination, got the instincts to be a pro. He's putting it all together, he's figuring things out, he's gotten so much better offensively until 11 games into his sophomore year, he tore his Achilles. And it was gut-wrenching. It was the A&M game. I remember that. It was so, the highs and lows of that weekend for basketball were big time because he is so important to the culture and things on this team. And he kept good spirits the whole season, at least publicly. I'm sure there was, moments, athletes getting injured always hits hard. And I don't mean to say that it didn't hit him hard as well. But he seemed to be very much like the team's number one cheerleader for the bench and very involved in those kinds of ways, right? Good culture guy. Again, probably got the best culture in America. Makes sense, right? He played 11 games last season. Houston finished having played 37 games. And so he did come in under the 30% mark and put in asking for a medical redshirt. And on Thursday, he was granted that medical redshirt. So Terrance Arceneaux will be athletically a sophomore in the 2024-25 basketball season. And that's a big, big deal. It means he has 3 years left of eligibility to play at Houston. I guess technically or wherever else, but he's from Beaumont. He's got a role here. There's no reason to leave. I did hear some people talking about, like, does he need a fresh whispers behind this, like in the blogospheres about does he need a fresh start somewhere and those kinds of things last year when people were saying they're going to, re-up to run it back or whatever. Kid's Houstonian, Beaumont, but from the area through and through, right? Stayed on. Terrance is granted that redshirt. It's a big deal for him. 3 years to continue to develop and grow into that potential that we talked about. Again, there were people putting him in late second rounds of NBA mock drafts just because of the potential he presents. Having 3 more years to healthily reach that, especially coming off that injury and to work his way back into playing shape. And the Achilles injury is interesting because it's a 12-month deal, but truthfully, like, you kind of like have to mentally get to the next gear too. This is going to be so good for him because if not, he'd be playing his junior season, kind of getting back into that gear. And then the senior season is kind of like, all right, this is it before you can get to the next level, right? This is going to be a big, it takes a lot of pressure off of the season for Terrance individually and kind of helps Houston justify working him in at a maybe not slower because they need him, but a not as fast of a pace, right? I think Terrance will be a big part of what Houston's doing this season. Obviously, his classmate, as far as high school recruits go, Emmanuel Sharp, is going to be a big part, right? And that backcourt is particularly loaded with LJ Cryer, Milo Suzanne, Mercy Miller's a big-time freshman coming in, et cetera, right? But he really kind of fits more in that forward spot too, with Ramon Walker, with Chase McCarty, big-time freshman coming in as well, right? Who knows if JoJo is going to be more of the 4, more of the 5 this year. Joe and Roberts obviously going to be one of the best power forwards in America. All of that is to say that he now, with his individual career having another year at Houston, he kind of has more time to grow and do what's best for him and the team and those kinds of things throughout this. I still, until I see something that shows me otherwise, think Terrance will be a pro basketball player in this country at the G League or NBA level. He's just that kind of a defender with that kind of instincts. And he has shown, again, he only got to play 11 games as a sophomore, showed so much growth offensively, though, that I feel pretty confident that things are going to work out. And I'm happy he gets another year to do that. Right. I know the program is, you see Kellen Sampson stoked about it online. Like, this is a good thing for the program, good thing for Terrance as well, and exciting to see happen. And I want to make sure we didn't go into the weekend without saying congratulations. That's a big deal. I know he did play less than the 30% of the season, so it was probably fairly assumed by a lot of people, but these medical redshirts can get tricky. The NCAA cancels or dismisses the request, denies them for a bunch of different weird reasons, right? And so Terrance getting it approved is a good and significant thing. So way to go, Terrance. Happy for you, man. If you're happy for him as well, I want to celebrate in the comments down below. Think I'm way off on something I said today, I want to tell me in the comments down below. Whatever you can do, you can tell me in the comments, or you can find me on social media, X, Twitter, Blue Sky, whatever, at Painsworth512, PAINSWORTH 512 on whatever social media service you're looking things up on. Thank you again for making Locked On Cougs your first listen. If you're looking for a second listen, Big 12 news is happening and changing every day. Drake Toll is doing a great job of covering it over at Locked On Big 12, so go check him out. Again, Locked On Cougs, proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. It means your team every day. Go Cougs.